It's the music of my people. Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Heather, and as always, I'm reading with a vengeance, and as always, I hope you are as well. Today, I am here to talk to you about the books that I've read so far in May. It's been a pretty decent reading month so far. Before I get started, I just wanted to give a shout out to some new subscribers. I've had a few join up in the past week or so, and I want to say a big welcome and thank you for hitting that subscribe button. I hope you enjoy the content. My subscribers that I have already, I want to thank you so much for coming back. When you like my videos, it's super helpful to my channel, and when you comment, it's not only helpful to my channel, I really enjoy engaging with you all. So win-win all around. So thank you so much for your support. I've been really having a good time, so I'm glad you're enjoying it as well. One thing I want to mention at the beginning of this video is I just kind of tacked on at the end of the video. My husband and I went and visited a flower field a few days ago. It's called Wicked Tulips here in Connecticut, and it's just that. It's a flower field full of different colored tulips. It's beautiful. It's funny because I was born and raised in San Diego, and we have a flower field in Carlsbad, and I have yet to go to that, but finally we went to a flower field, and it's just beautiful. And I took some video, and I'll add that to the end of the video. If you're not interested, then I'll tell you when the end of the book talk is over, and then you can just click off. But if you're interested, it was really pretty, and spring is upon us, so I just thought I'd share that with you all. So let's talk about the books that I've read so far. I have 8 to talk to you about so far. So let's get started. The first book that I finished for the month of May was a Spindle Splintered by Alix Harrow. I read the physical book. I checked it out from the library, so I've already returned it because I am a very good library girl. This is a sci-fi Sleeping Beauty reimagining, but it's got a feminist spin to it, which I really enjoyed. So this follows Zinnia, and she is about to turn 21, and for reasons, it'll be the last birthday that she ever has. When she was young, she suffered an industrial accident, left her with a rare condition, and nobody with this condition has lived past the age of 21. Nobody knows much about the condition. It just is. She's trying to live it up with her best friend Charm before she turns 21. And then on the day of her birthday, she does prick her finger and something crazy happens. She spins out of her present world and she goes into another world, and she meets the actual Sleeping Beauty, which I thought was interesting the way it was written. Zinnia knows of the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty and knows that it's a fairy tale, but still she spins into this other world, meets the actual, I guess, Aurora, but who's also trying to escape her fate as well. She also meets a couple of other Sleeping Beauties, if you will, but just different cultural folklore Sleeping Beauties. Like, I guess there's a story in Viking mythology that kind of follows the same tale. I thought that was interesting too. And so they're all trying to help each other so that their fate in the patriarchal world that we live in doesn't happen to them. So it's a little bit of an adventure story slash sci-fi slash fantasy. And that feminist spin on it is basically, help yourself out of a problem, and all your problems aren't going to be solved if you get the boyfriend, the husband, whatever, or get that kiss on the lips or anywhere else for that matter. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you take care of business. So I really enjoyed that. I'd say I appreciated the story and the spin of it. As someone who grew up with Sleeping Beauty, I really appreciated what Harrow did with the story, but I wasn't compelled by it, and I didn't really connect with the characters. I feel like I'm not really the target audience for this story, but still I appreciate it. I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read in May is The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. And this one, funny story, I had mentioned it in a previous video. I was watching BookTube and was watching one BookTube episode, and she mentioned this book. I'd never heard of it. And she said that she was rereading it. She loved it as a kid, and she reread it and she enjoyed it again. I'm like, oh, then I looked it up, and that sounds interesting, but I wasn't like gonna run out and get it. And then the same day, I watched another separate booktuber, and she talked about this book as well, and said that she loved it. And I'm like, interesting. Okay, I'll add it to my TBR. And these are adult women who, because this is a middle grade book. And I said, okay, well, my interest is piqued. And then I think when I was finished walking my dogs, I noticed that there was activity in my little free library that I have out front. And so I always like to see what is new in the library. And 3 guesses what I found in my little free library. And 2 of them don't count. I think it was the universe trying to tell me, you should probably read this book. So I did. And don't worry, as soon as I finish recording this, I'll be putting this back in my little free library. 16 people are kind of gathered to come and live in this tower. And the tower is owned by Sam Westing. And Sam Westing lives in this big house that's behind this residential tower. He gathers these unlikely folks to all live in this tower. And Sam dies, and all these people are gathered for the reading of the will. And Sam pretty much speaks to all of them saying, you're going to embark on this game. The winner of the game inherits my entire estate, which is hefty. But one of you murdered me. So it's this mystery, and yes, it is middle grade, and that sounds kind of dark for middle grade. It's not as dark as you would think it seems. And the characters are cute. There's a precocious 13-year-old girl nicknamed Turtle, and she's funny and she's cute and she's a little naughty. The 16 people, they all have their characteristics and quirks and personalities of their own, and they're cute and fun to follow, and the mystery is somewhat engaging, but you know, again, I wasn't really the target audience. I thought it was cute. I'm glad it was short. I got through it rather quickly. I gave it 2.5 stars. The next book that I read for the month of May was The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. This book, I'm sure you've been hearing a bunch about this book because, of course, the Women's Prize for Fiction. It is on the shortlist. That is why I read it. Interestingly enough, and I'm about to blather on and on about the Women's Prize for Fiction. So if you have been following my journey, you can take a potty break or go refill your coffee. When the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction came out, I cherry picked some of the ones that weren't, I knew I wasn't going to read the entire long list, but I picked the ones that seemed interesting to me. This was not on that original list. I don't know, the synopsis just didn't interest me. Then I started listening to other booktubers talk about it, and it started to intrigue me. And I was even intrigued about one of the aspects of this story that I'll mention in just a second. But I did know that I wanted to read the entire shortlist for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and of course, this was on it. So I ended up getting this. If you saw my vlog, this is one of the books that I got when I did my tour of the Independent Bookstore Day. I ended up buying this one. I don't typically buy hardcover, but I didn't really have a choice. And my library didn't have it. So I ended up buying this, and I'm so glad I did. And I will also mention that there's a booktuber that I watch, and we mostly have similar tastes, and she hated this book. And I listened to her talk about it, and this is before I read it. She hated this book, and one of the things that she hated about it was that there is one of the main character, Ada, is a 16-year-old girl, and she is bitter and brooding and moody and, you know, snarky and sarcastic. And the booktuber, hated the fact that she was written that way because she felt it was cliche. You know, oh, a teenager, oh, she's going to have an attitude problem. Listen, if there's a teenage girl who doesn't go through a period of snarky sarcasm, moodiness, that's the exception, not the rules. So I felt like Ada was written perfectly. Not to mention, she has a really good reason for being moody. And it's not a spoiler, but Ada, her mom has died like within the last year, and she's struggling. It's just her and her dad. There's that. And then, as you might have known, one of the, there's alternating perspectives. And one of the perspectives in this book is a fig tree. And that sounds weird, and I thought it sounded weird at first too, but it absolutely works. It's a fig tree that grows up through the middle of this tavern, and it gives a kind of an objective, but not, point of view of what's going on around her. And she also talks about, you know, the migratory patterns of butterflies and how it relates to human relationships. And she talks about different species of trees and how they survive and how they relate to animals and other trees and how that all relates to human relationships. And it's brilliant. What's it about? So Ada, yes, is a 16-year-old girl. She's with her dad. She lives with her dad. Her mom passed away like a year ago, and she's struggling. Her dad is struggling. Her ancestry, her dad is from the island of Cyprus. It starts off with Ada's story, and Ada's going through kind of a bullying situation at school because there was an incident at school that involved Ada, and it was caught on video, and the video has gone viral now, and she's dealing with that. It's not a huge part of the story, and I thought it was interesting the way it was handled, just because it's so relevant these days. It's a multiple timeline as well, and it goes back and it talks about how Ada's parents meet. And Ada's parents, they're both from Cyprus, but I can't remember which one's which, but one is Greek and one is Turkish, and there has been a history of civil unrest between Turkish and Greek Cypriots, I think they're referred to. It talks a lot about war and love and tolerance and relationships. Ada wants to know where she comes from, and Ada wants to know her history, but her dad won't talk about it. But it gets into that as well too. And her aunt, her mother's sister, comes and stays with them for a little while, and she is willing to talk about it. It's about relationships and love, and it's just beautifully written. I probably didn't do a great job describing this. Read this book. It's so heartwarming. This woman right here can write. It's so beautifully written. The words she uses and the way she relates trees. I had a conversation with somebody who had just finished reading this at about the same time that I finished reading it. And one of the things that she said was, I will always be careful about how I treat trees from now on. And I had to agree. There's also a lovely, lovely twist at the end. Not a huge gasp twist, but a lovely twist. It just kind of wraps up the story. And I can't recommend this enough. 5 stars, all the stars. I really encourage you to read it. If you have any interest at all, if it intrigues you at all, if you think the fig tree perspective is weird, I promise you it works. It's just beautiful. The next book I read, I listened to, and that was Blood for Blood by Graudin. This is the second book in the Wolf by Wolf duology. I can't say much about it because of spoilers, and I have blathered on and on about Wolf by Wolf because Wolf by Wolf was a 5-star read for me. It's probably going to be one of my favorites of the year, and I've talked a lot about it. So I finally read the second one. I feel like Wolf by Wolf it did need a second book just because of how it ended, but it just wasn't the same. It was a different story. I think so Wolf by Wolf is genre bending book. It is historical fiction, sci-fi, adventure, extravaganza. It follows Yael, and it takes place in 1956, but it takes place in an alternate 1956 where Hitler has won World War II and he's running the world. And as a celebration of his victory, he puts on this intercontinental, international, as far as who can participate, motorcycle race. And the winner of that race gets invited to this victory ball, and that person gets to meet Hitler. So Yael, who is a young Jewish woman, she, as a girl, escaped the concentration camps, but not before being experimented on. And the result of those experiments has given her the ability to skin shift. She can look at somebody or a picture and she can replicate that person. And so she, as part of the resistance, replicates the previous year motorcycle race winner to do the race this year, win the race, and then go to the victory ball and kill Hitler. And I won't say what happens at the end of Wolf by Wolf, but in Blood for Blood, the story continues. She's on the run with another person that she met in the race that she participated in. I'm trying so hard. It's so hard not to give spoilers. I'm glad I read it. It was good. It wasn't Wolf by Wolf. I think that's kind of something that happens in series, or especially in duologies. You know, when you only have two. I did enjoy it. I did enjoy following up with Yael again and her adventure and her struggle as part of the resistance and trying to take Hitler down. You know, I felt compelled by the story, but again, it just wasn't the same. So this one I gave 3.5 stars. The next book I read in the month of May is Penguin the Magpie, The Odd Little Bird Who Saved a Family by Cameron Bloom and Bradley Trevor Grieve. Gloria, of course, from Gloria Z. Thompson. She talked about this in one of her videos, and I was immediately intrigued because of course, if you've watched me before, I've talked about how I absolutely love stories. It talks about the relationship between humans and animals, and yes, this is no exception. This is a beautiful little story, a true story of a family, and it's Cameron, one of the authors, his wife Sam, and their 3 sons. They go on vacation, and a terrible accident happens, a near fatal accident, where Sam, the mom, she survives, but she is paralyzed. It talks about her struggle. This would be a struggle for anybody, but for her specifically, who's a super athletic, active woman, super involved with her 3 boys' lives. She was on the brink of, not wanting to go on. And then kind of at the same time that she's going through this depression, back home in Australia, one of her little boys finds an abandoned, injured baby magpie and brings them home, and they nurse this magpie back to health. And it's the story of kind of the dual struggle between with Sam, that one that she's having, and the magpie, and how the family comes together, and it's a beautiful, heartbreaking but hopeful story. This book is mostly photographs, and I believe Cameron Bloom is the photographer in these, and it's beautiful, and there's just some really cute pictures too. And it's their family and of course, Penguin. I really enjoyed it. And I thank you, Gloria, for bringing this to my attention. They did a Netflix movie called Penguin Bloom, and I'm hesitant to watch it because I think it'll break my heart. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I absolutely recommend it. I would say that the couple of things that I guess kept it from being a 5-star for me. One is I wanted more. He does go into, what happened and their struggle, but I felt like it was a story that it could have been, at the very minimum, a novella. I wanted more of what was going on. Another thing that I didn't really, and this is just me, but the very end of the book, because most of the book, it's all from Cameron's perspective. But the end of the book, and I would say there's about 10 pages, Sam writes herself, and it's kind of her saying, her message that basically says, I'm not going to sit here and say that, this accident saved my life or was a gift or, made me a better person. She was very direct, and I really enjoyed that. And, she was kind of directing her message to people who have suffered the same injury that she has. She didn't sugarcoat it. She just said, it's hard. It's a struggle every day. I don't want to give you the impression that, everything is great, because it's not. So I appreciated that candidness and that honesty. But the very end of her message was asking for donations to the foundation. I believe it's the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, Research for Spinal Injuries. And yes, I believe that should have been somewhere in the book as, I don't know, a separate page. saying, here's a foundation, your donations will help. I don't know, I felt like ending her very poignant, very hard-hitting, very honest, important message. I don't think that asking for money should have been part of it. That's just me. Other than that, really inspirational. And of course, you know, relationships where humans interact with animals in a positive way, that speaks to my heart. So 4 solid stars. The next book I read, I also listened to, and it's called Squeeze Me by Hiaasen. I absolutely adore Hiaasen's writing. I've read almost all of his books. I think there's only one adult book that I haven't read yet. I think I've only read 1 or 2 of his young adult, if not middle grade books. He's the one that wrote Flush and Hoot. All of his adults, save one, I've read, and they're so much fun. Some of them are part of a series, and Squeeze Me is the 8th in what's called the Skink series, and Skink is one of the characters in the books. It's interesting, but he's never a main character. I think there's only one in the series where he is the main character, if memory serves, but I'm blathering. Hiaasen writes humorous mystery, and they always take place in Florida. And I don't know if you've seen online or read articles, you know, where if you type in Google, man from Florida, some of the most bizarre articles pop up, and they're usually true because weird stuff happens down there, and it totally plays into his plots and his stories, and they're so much fun because, like I said, he writes mystery, and it's usually, yes, the mystery is the main part of the plot, but where these books shine are the characters. They're quirky, they're weird, they're hilarious, and they're uncannily accurate. You know, you have criminals who are inept and corrupt politicians. Example, they made a movie, Striptease with Demi Moore, total camp, crap movie. Really, those are what his books read like. They shouldn't be movies. They just shouldn't. Reading them is just so much better. But Striptease is based on one of his books. So Squeeze Me was the 8th, and it was not a disappointment. It was super fun to read. Laugh out loud funny. If you haven't read Hiaasen and you just need a palate cleanser and just some fun summertime reading, I highly recommend them. I mean, any of them are just super cute. And I don't think you need to read any of them in order. Tourist Season, I think, was the first in the series, and I think it might have been the first Hiaasen I ever read, and it had me hooked, so I would highly recommend that. Sick Puppy, Striptease is hilarious, but yes, if you haven't read him, I highly recommend it. This one I gave, I think, 3.5 stars. Yeah, 3.5 stars. The next book I read in the month of May was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Of course, if you have been watching my videos, you know I've been anticipating this one a bunch. This one's written by Becky Chambers, of course. This is sci-fi. More specifically, it's a space opera, which I had to look up to find out what that meant, and I was super excited about that. If you don't know, I guess space opera is a subgenre of sci-fi where it's kind of like a drama, written kind of like contemporary fiction, but it takes place in space, and there's sci-fi involved. Relationships are involved, and there's a central plot that doesn't really necessarily have to be sci-fi, but it just kind of takes place in a sci-fi world. So this one in particular, this is the first in the Wayfarer series, and the Wayfarer is the name of the ship that these main characters are on, and the purpose of their ship is they create wormholes in space. Don't ask me what a wormhole is. I'm a newbie when it comes to sci-fi, but that's just kind of secondary to what this book is about. It really follows the characters, the captain of the ship, Ashby, and then there's Rosemary. She comes on board. She's the newest crew member, and she's got a shady past, which you learn about. Those are the 2 humans on board. I think there's 2 other humans, the engineers, Jenks and what is her name? Kizzy. Then there's non-human species on board. They all are on this ship, and I like the parallels of, you know, different species learning to get along with each other. Obviously, there's a parallel to that's relevant. I found that interesting. I found that brilliantly written. It's not really in your face, yet it is a message that comes across in the story. The characters were super fun. There was a lot of sci-fi jargon. If you're somebody who already enjoys sci-fi, who seeks out sci-fi, and sci-fi is your jam, and you haven't read this yet, I would recommend it. It's good. I found getting past the descriptions of how a ship works and a description of wormhole. There was just a lot of science-y descriptions that either A, went over my head, or B, I just didn't find interesting. The story itself was good. I enjoyed the characters. I thought they were fun, and there were some that were funny. There's a couple of love interests that I thought was touching, but I didn't really connect with the characters. Will I read the second one? I don't know, maybe eventually. But yeah, I enjoyed this. Oh, and I also found that this was, I think, almost a 500-page book. I felt like it could have been about 100 pages shorter. That's just me too. When I got to about 350, I was ready for the story to be over. Other than that, I'm glad I read it. Like I said, I'm not going to actively seek out the second one in the series, at least not immediately. I gave this one 3.5 stars. And the last book that I have finished, well, not the last book, but the most recent book that I have finished for the month of May is Travel Anywhere and Avoid Being a Tourist by Geraldine Gerba and Pavia Rosati, who are the founders of Fathom. And Fathom is a website that is like a travel agency, travel information website. So I picked this up probably a year and a half ago. And I picked it up because it's got a beautiful cover and I love to travel. And then I flipped through it and it's got some really beautiful pictures in here. But the biggest problem with this book is the title. I picked up this book, I took the title for what it says, and I thought it was going to be something where it had tips on, kind of when you do travel to be off the beaten path and not go to where all the tourists go. But the problem with that, and I totally understand it, I realize that if you write a book about, hey, go here and very few tourists go here, well, when you put the book out, it becomes a tourist attraction. Still, it's a beautiful book, and I thought it would be a really nice coffee table book and just something that would give me ideas, because I do love to travel and I do love to be off the beaten path. Generally, when we travel, we do Airbnbs and we talk to the owners of the Airbnbs to find out, what the local haunts are, and that's still really the way to go as far as I'm concerned if you want to kind of immerse yourself in a local culture and not see the places or go to the places or see the things that most tourists go to see. The other thing that was problematic with this book is that, at least at the beginning, there's a lot of places, either hotels or restaurants or experiences that are in here that are recommended that are only for people who are the 1% of the world's wealthiest people. If you are one of those people, then you would enjoy this book. Or if you are just somebody who maybe you do want to have a once in a lifetime experience and you don't mind, blowing a bunch of money at that one thing. So there is one section that was kind of disheartening for me personally, but then, as I read further on, there are some good tidbits in here. The book is helpful in that it is broken down into categories. There's a chapter of going off the grid. There's a chapter of if you are going to a certain spot and you're just interested in the food. You want to know where the best places are to get interesting meals. Then there's if you're traveling because it's all about wellness. If you want to do good in the world, if you want to go and turn it into a trip where you're helping people. There's a chapter in very interesting hotels that are around the world, hotels that didn't start off as hotels. For instance, there's a hotel in Boston that started off as a prison. Very interesting. It's called, I think, the Liberty Hotel, but not cheap. A couple of notes that I made. Did you know that a group of zebras is called a dazzle? I found that pretty interesting. Not so helpful tip. There's things in Rome that you can do that are off the beaten path that you won't hear about other people going to. However, you don't want to go to Rome without visiting the Colosseum or the Spanish Steps. So they give tips of, that's kind of common sense. If you want to see those things, then you want to go at off-peak hours. Well, of course. What are some other tips? Oh, one thing I didn't know, using chopsticks. You know, you're not supposed to spear things with chopsticks. That's a no-no. There's a little section here, like a little footnote on one page of your bar order around the world. What to drink to feel like a local, morning, noon, and night. For instance, in Argentina, in the morning, cafe con leche. Noon, mate. And in the evening, a glass of Malbec. In Japan, morning, barley tea. Noon, matcha. Evening, sake. There's like 10 other countries here. So those little tidbits. And again, it's riddled with beautiful, gorgeous photographs and places that might pique your interest. But the title is definitely a misnomer. You know, it's not avoiding being a tourist. I gave it 3 stars. And that's it. That's what I've read so far. Have you read any of these? Let me know what you thought of them. I hope I've piqued your interest in some of these books. What am I reading now? So I'm listening to One by One by Ruth Ware. I just started On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. From what I understand, this is a letter that a man has written to his mother who can't read. It just deals with his relationship with his mom. So far, my favorite of the month is, if it's not obvious, The Island of Missing Trees. Definitely want to get to these by the end of the month. We have My Policeman by Beth Ann Roberts, Know My Name by Chanel Miller, and The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. So we'll see how they go. What are you reading right now? I would love to know. Please feel free to comment down in the doodly-doo or any other comments that you'd like to leave. I enjoy them immensely. If you're still watching at this point, please consider giving that like button a boop and subscribing to my channel. It's super helpful and I really appreciate it. I'm having so much fun doing this. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. This is the end of the book content, so I'm going to plug in my videos from the tulip fields. I hope you enjoy those, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.